Ladies and gentlemen, the Encyclopedia Show.
Woo! Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the Encyclopedia Show. My name is Duck Washington. I will be your host. I'll also be running slides from over here in the corner. How many of you have ever seen the Encyclopedia Show before? Woo! Awesome. How many of you this is the first time? Well, you're going to get the abbreviated version today, but it'll also be super fun. The nature of our show is that every month we come up with a different encyclopedia topic. It might be something like jails or condiments. It could be any kind of thing. And then we go out in the community and we find artists to create short artistic pieces based on those topics. Our topic for tonight is unusual games. One of the more interesting aspects of the show, though, is that for our shows, we have a fact checker that judges the performers for truths and lies as they go through in a comedic fashion. And for that, I'd like to welcome to the stage Tim Wick.
Thank you. Hi, Duck.
Hi, Tim. How are you today?
I am very knowledgeable.
Good. That's kind of the requirement of the job.
I thought so.
Are you looking for anything particular from our performers today?
Well, I'm looking for facts, Duck. I'm looking for truth as opposed to lies. Lies make me angry. They make me upset. I don't like being upset. This is a 50-hour comedy marathon. I have a long way to go. So, for instance, do you know what swing is, Duck?
Isn't that the noise that the Wayne's World?
No, it's a game that they play in Scotland. It's sort of like a combination of golf, baseball, and making pizza.
Wow.
I knew that because I know things. So that's my job tonight, to know things. Thank you.
So it sounds like Tim is going to be one of our harsher judges. All right. So the goal of the show is for us to hopefully have more truths at the end than we have lives. Let's see if our artists can't screw it up. Please welcome to the stage our first guest, the amazing, the wonderful Elizabeth S.
Hello. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. That's the truth. All right. Okay. That's the title slide. Next slide, please. I took our unusual topic to mean several things, including things it does not mean, according to Merriam-Webster. While Chris Isaac's hit single was Wicked Game and not Unusual Game, it was an altogether unusual moment in pop music. Next slide. Let's start with Chris Isaak. He's the American Morrissey, the Roy Orbison of the 90s, with a swoosh of hair styled with Scotchgard to protect it from groupie juices. Chris was one of the last true crooners. The concept of a crooner has roots in blues and big band music. The concept of, I already said that. Owing its early 20th century popularity to the advent of radio. It thrives in an intimate setting like a yeast infection. Crooning, when done well, becomes more about sharing vulnerability and less about vocal range and pushing artistic limits. Crooner is considered an epithet. Frank Sinatra did not like being called a crooner, and yet it works pretty well considering, it's an epithet. I say crooner and you don't think Marilyn Manson. Next slide. Okay, that's good. Crooners are usually solo acts, but they can form musical and contractual bonds with other crooners. They come in 2s and 4s and 5s, but never 3s. A triangle is the strongest shape, and crooners are weak. When I was a child, I was conflicted about crooners. The crooners I was most familiar with were Dwight Yoakam, Katie Lang, and Lyle Lovett. Their place in music didn't make sense to me. They were vulnerable and moody and mournful publicly, and I considered mournfulness a hobby one kept to oneself. And music to me was about partying and massive egos, which was wrong. But the more I researched cute men in pop music, the fruits of which you see here, the more difficult I found it to classify crooner versus non-crooner. It's kind of a blurry distinction. We can go to the next slide. Let's go to the song. Wicked Game took an unusual route to becoming a hit. It was released on November 8th, 1989, which makes it a Scorpio. And like a Scorpio, the song is broodingly sexual and inscrutable. Many listeners thought the song was about unrequited love. Chris himself said it was about a crush of his asking for a one-night stand. He turned her down because it wasn't the full-blown one-week stand that he was in the market for. So it was about unrequited love, just not his. Chris himself put it this way. A girl had called me and said, I want to come over and talk to you. And talk was a euphemism. I want to come over and talk to you until you're no longer able to stand up. And I said, okay, you're coming over. And as soon as I hung up, I thought, oh my God, I know she's going to be trouble. She's always been trouble. She's a wildcat. And here I am. I'm going to get killed, but I'm going to do this. By the time she came over to the house, I had the song written. And I think she was probably upset because I was more excited by the song. And it made sense for him to be excited about the song. His career up to that point had been lackluster, with 3 albums released so far and no big break. As Rolling Stone put it, Isaac's intensely atmospheric rock and roll was out of step with commercial radio. His records didn't sell. Then, through the magic of the year 1990, David Lynch caught wind of this inscrutable tune and liked it so much he featured it in his film Wild at Heart. Since then, he has used Chris's music several times in movies and on the show Twin Peaks. After Wild at Heart had been out a few months, the music director at an Atlanta radio station started playing the song a disturbingly yet effective amount of times. Chris's career was about to take off, and now he had to make a music video. Next slide. So when making a music video, would you want supermodel Helena Christensen rolling around on a beach of black sand and lingerie, or something weird directed by David Lynch? Porque no los dos. 2 music videos were made. One of them won 3 MTV Video Music Awards, ranked number 13 on VH1's 100 Greatest Videos, and number 4 on VH1's 50 Sexiest Video Moments. And one of them was directed by David Lynch. Now, it would be wrong of me to leave out the 3rd unofficial video for Wicked Game. Next slide. All right, where am I here? Okay. So before they went on a break, Ross and Rachel first had to get together. Wicked Game provided the mood music for these 2 ships passing in the night to stop passing and finally collide at the planetarium. There's an ad on that. Okay. So it's a date. I'm gonna just narrate this. It's a date, and it's like Pam and Jim, if you guys remember that. And then it's a juice box, and then some like narrator guy talks. It's really great. You should watch it or something. And then they play his song. So yeah, that's about it. Okay, next slide. It really does. Someone like the technology likes Friends more than I personally would. Okay. All right, there we go. Chris never came close to releasing a commercially successful single or album at the same level as Wicked Game. To this day, Chris enjoys a regular tour schedule of Hy-Vee grand openings and does well for himself, all things considered. He's a nice guy and he hasn't been hit by a bus. So that's his life right now. And yeah, that's the picture Wikipedia has as his like current picture. So yeah, if he ever goes missing, we're in trouble. And then next slide, it's time for footnotes, as I'm really committed to truth's victory tonight. So let's go to the next slide. Does Randy Travis resemble Chris Isaak? That's a question for the scholars to sort out in another place at another time, or you can eyeball it there for yourself, and it's perfectly acceptable to remain agnostic on the subject. Next slide. As a Scorpio myself, I'm offended at all the stereotypes there are about Scorpios. We're not all manipulative, oversexed mystery bags. We are often kind-hearted people like Roseanne Barr and Ivanka Trump. We are often non-sexual people like Bill Gates and Carl Sagan. And we often lack mystery like Weird Al Yankovic, Katie Lang, and Lyle Lovett. Yes, we're coming kind of full circle here. And next slide. Yes, Hanson was a trio of pop musicians / crooners. They are the exception to the rule. And they are exceptional in this instance and many others, including the amount of children they have fathered as adults. It's excessive even for musicians, okay? And that's it. I will now return this to our host for the evening, and please remember to donate to Fearless.
Elizabeth S., everybody. Wow, Chris Isaac. I did not expect Chris Isaac, except I did because I had to put it on the computer. But Tim, you didn't know anything about that, so what did you think?
I knew everything about that, Duck. I don't know what you're talking about. So I want to go through a few truths. You said the title slide was the title slide. That was correct. You also said Chris Isaac hasn't been hit by a bus. That was also correct. And finally, you did correct the fact that you had not mentioned Hanson. So those were all true. Well done. But we do have a few problems. You indicated that crooning could be done well. That is a lie. You also said partying and massive egos were wrong. Also a lie. You said in reference to Friends, quote, "It's really great." That's a lie. And finally, you brought up astrology, which is BS. So we have 3 truths and 4 lies.
Oh.
We're in a little bit of a trouble.
Ooh, all right. Well, let's give another round of applause for Elizabeth. We have a little bit of a hole, but our next performer is seasoned in the Encyclopedia ways, and hopefully we'll right the ship. Please welcome to the stage the amazing and spectacular Pat Harrigan.
Hello. My old friend Victor Roth has asked me to record this video for you to let everyone know where we are with the Kickstarter. Unfortunately, Victor is too busy to update you himself, but since I am familiar with the current situation from the sequence of interviews I conducted with him for Strategy and Tactics magazine, I feel confident that I can answer all your questions. It should be said up front that Victor is still alive, is still working on the game, and has not moved to Australia, as various rumors have had it. But as you know, the Kickstarter has been considerably delayed, and many of you are justifiably upset by that, judging from the disintegratingly vile tone of the comments page, about which I will say no more, except maybe check yourself, Brenda. We already sent you your refund, and also that's not how you spell cunt nozzles. Okay. The original, relatively modest Kickstarter was for Action Ardennes, a new regimental scale wargame about the Battle of the Bulge, to be designed by Victor Roth, and which would include 2 22 by 34-inch hex-based paper maps, 3 full counter sheets, rulebook including solitaire scenario, and several player aids. The stretch goals, all of which were quickly funded, would have added improved components, a mounted map, and a full-color rulebook. In addition, Victor suggested that the system he invented for this game might be applied to other theaters of World War II, and accordingly, some of the higher-level stretch goals included new scenarios for 1944's Operation Market Garden and a long Eastern Front campaign. It was also Victor's intention to expand the game with an additional half-sheet of counters and more detailed air and naval rules. The remarkable success of the Kickstarter and the subsequent flood of funding led Victor to expand on his original idea, and he began to sketch out ways in which the Ardennes system could be applied to other periods of conflict. The Korean War, World War I, and with some additional tweaking, NATO operations in the 1980s or even contemporary times. Now, if he had had more people around him then to bounce these ideas off of, this might all have stopped there. But at this time, he was going through quite a difficult divorce. He had never been skilled, he once told me, at playing what the writer Joanna Russ calls the game of happy families. So as you all know from his many, very, very long Kickstarter updates, he instead traveled farther down this road, now envisioning his system as a robust and greatly expandable one, capable of modeling everything from a hypothetical 21st century war between the USA and China to the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BC, when Ramses II led his Egyptian troops against the Hittites, and for which his anticipated 2 maps and 3.5 countersheets would be clearly inadequate. As well, it was important to Victor to build a multiplayer model, such as that found in his all-time favorite game, SBI Publishing's legendary 1978 The Campaign for North Africa, widely regarded as the most complex war game ever made, with its 1,800 counters, 10-foot-long map, and estimated playing time of 1,200 hours for 2 teams of 5 players each, who take on the roles of logistics commanders, rear area commanders, air commanders, frontline commanders, and commanders-in-chief. But even then, Victor grew dissatisfied with what he came to see as a myopic focus on combat and began to plot ways to model the political, economic, and world historical factors that lead to conflicts in the first place. Inspired by his reading of Jared Diamond's 1997 bestseller Guns, Germs, and Steel, Victor began to consider geographical, topographical, and bacteriological factors of paramount importance, and he now built in rules for historical agricultural expansion and the transmission of disease along multivalent human and animal vectors. Rules simulating cultural and social organization, religious schismatizing, philosophical concepting, and relativistic historicity soon followed. By this time, the size of the game's rulebook was approaching that of Advanced Squad Leader's 1,000-plus double-columned pages, and the cost of printing only that, to say nothing of the international shipping, would have exceeded all of the income from the Kickstarter. At this point, some of the more enthusiastic backers, and let me say to you, Victor would probably not have gone as far in this direction as he otherwise would have without your encouragement, so thank you very much for that. Some of these backers encouraged Victor to turn the project into a computer simulation, something like a combination of Sid Meier's Civilization games and Creative Assembly's Total War series. But Victor was, as always, fully committed to materiality. He spent much of his dwindling funds renting a warehouse space somewhere in Arlington, which I confess he has not let me see, and at which he now lives, eats, and sleeps, working on what has been for a long time now not called Action Ardennes, but instead by a name that Victor adopted from one of his favorite novels, John Fowles' 1965 The Magus. It is now called The God Game. That is where things stand right now. As far as you, our funders, are concerned, Victor appreciates that you have exhibited Job-like patience and has vowed to give you all your money's worth and more, he says. Naturally, he will refund pledge money to anyone who asks, and with no complaints from us, Brenda, but we're hoping that when you hear Victor's new pledge level rewards, you'll decide to stick with him. Those of you who have pledged at the $5 level will receive a personalized signed note of thanks from Victor. Backers at the $60 level, the projected price of one copy of Action Ardennes, will receive any 2 previous in-print games of comparable cost from Victor's back catalog, such as Slaughter at Shiloh, Borodino Butchery, or the Spiel des Jahres award winner Mr. Mouseface's fun game of colors and shapes. Backers at the $150 retailer level will get an even better price break on back catalog games. Please see the Kickstarter FAQ page for details. For those of you at the $250 level, Victor will send each of you an individual item of deep, almost magical significance, such as the first birthday card he ever received from his wife, or a photograph taken on the family vacation to Martha's Vineyard, which was the last time he ever felt any love for his father, or a tiny little onesie formerly worn by his infant son, which Victor sometimes opens the dresser drawer to smell in order to remind himself of those days. For those generous backers at the $1,000 level, Victor will fly to your home, supplying his own food and pillows, and spend several days reading aloud to you from Jonathan Franzen's 2001 Oprah Winfrey Book Club selection, The Corrections, which he's finally started and is really getting into. And for our single, anonymous, $10,000 5-star general level backer, we ask you to be patient just a little longer. Sometime soon, Victor will have you flown into Dulles Airport, where a driver will pick you up and deliver you to an office park about 25 minutes away, at which point you will be led into a large, darkened space and seated safely in a straight-backed but comfortable wooden chair. In a predetermined order, concealed lights will begin to illuminate parts of your surrounding area. There is no telling what Victor has built for you in his game laid out on the tessellated tile floor. You might see the cardboard armies of Hannibal crossing the Alps, or every battle of the Wars of the Roses with tiny plastic horses breathing steam and frothing blood. The glory of the Manchu court, the debates of the Second Vatican Council, where the treasure sank, where the votes went, your MRI results, your mother's face, your place in the system. You might learn the reason you were right to regret that email, you know the one, or find revealed to you those hidden moves made by secret players that broke that friendship that still hurts, or the exact quantity of love remaining on the resource track of your heart. And though some of this will certainly be alarming, you should feel reassured that Victor Roth himself will be there, standing beside you in soft-soled shoes, with his hand resting on your shoulder, periodically leaning down to whisper explanations in your ear, taking pains to clarify every detail until it's all as simple as can be, and I have it on his personal word that at the end of it all, it will all make sense. A veil will pass away, and you will have learned each and every rule of the game when he lifts you up to play it. Thank you for your support.
Give it up to Pat Harrigan, everybody. Yeah, I love having Pat here. Tim.
Wow, you know, I was really getting into that until I stopped paying attention. But, you know, a few truths. He described the most complete war game ever made. That was accurate. And then he mentioned about don't read the comments. Absolutely, that is the truth. There were a few lies I'm worried about. First of all, lay off Brenda. She's had a hard week. I don't know, Pat. Come on. And then you mentioned, I'm sorry, you said income from a Kickstarter. And I gave you 2 lies for that. So we're 5-7. Lies are still winning.
Oh, no.
But we're it's not bad. We've still got a chance.
All right. So thank you. Let's give it another round of applause for Pat. If you can't tell, I'm sweating a little bit up here. I really don't want us to lose. But the next performer will hopefully correct all of the wrong that Pat just did. Please give a huge round of applause for the amazing host of this hour, Jenna Young.
Oh my. All right. This is a comedy show, right? All right. The day we applied for our marriage license, Bill and I also purchased 12 Nerf guns. They were gifts for several people in our wedding party. When we went to purchase the guns, we took a shopping cart and headed to the toy aisle of Target. We discussed who would get which kind of gun. My child got a shotgun, and the other participants all got 6-shooter revolvers with a rotating barrel. We filled the cart and started down the aisle. As we turned the corner, there was a little boy. He saw the cart full of Nerf guns, and his eyes got wide and round. Bill never slowed down in his step. As we passed by the kid, Bill says to him, "That's right, kid. When you're an adult, you can buy all the Nerf guns you want," and just kept on walking. We got married. After the wedding party gifts were passed out, and a Nerf gun fight ensued. Darts flew every which way. Some stuck to foreheads and bald spots. One dart passed over while we were signing the marriage certificate. The battle went on for quite a while. Just as it seemed to slow down, another shot was fired and everything would pick back up again. There were fake deaths and fast recoveries. The battleground was littered with darts. Our wedding was a day of glory and honor. I don't want to spoil this for anyone who doesn't know us, but our marriage didn't last. The reasons are ours, and it wasn't for anything nefarious like cheating or abuse, but the marriage was unworkable for several reasons, and eventually we had to admit there was no getting around them. Still, I don't think ours was a bad marriage. It was full of love and play. Bill loved to make people laugh, and he and I became partners in crime. We would encourage each other's acts, but we also did sketch and other comedy together. We continued to do so after the divorce as well. Many times during our marriage, a Nerf gun fight would break out. Often, my daughter would win. We didn't let her. She's just the kind of person that would bring a lightsaber to a Nerf gun fight. Look, Nerf guns have their place, but why shoot someone when you have the Force, right? Bill would never get upset or try to enforce any kind of rules for these. He loved it. Bill and I were divorced for 8 months before he passed. At his memorial, we had a 21 Nerf gun salute. Only it was way more than 21. I think someone counted 59. Regardless, when it came time to fire, everyone did. Darts went everywhere. There wasn't an ongoing battle, but I was reminded of our wedding day when the darts littered the ground. The last thing Bill and I did on our wedding day was to head out to the Bulldog with several people from the wedding party. A few people still had their Nerf guns. One person discovered that you could spin the gun. Another person discovered that you could spin the barrel. And that's how we invented Nerf Russian roulette drinking game. The barrel is loaded with only one dart. The gun is set in the middle of the table and you spin the gun, much like spin the bottle. Whomever the gun points to has to pick up the gun, spin the barrel, aim it at their head, and shoot. If there is no dart, if nothing shoots the person, the gun is placed in the middle of the table, spun, and repeat. If you get shot, you have to take a shot because you're shot. Shot. Life is a game, one that everyone can win. There are no real rules. You make them up as you go along, and you can play for your own reasons, to succeed at something, to lift up others, to pass the time. Everyone can win so long as they're honest about their own rules. There were many things that I learned from Bill, but one of the most important was the need for play. That laughter can help for most situations. That we should prioritize enjoying our time here on this ridiculous planet. And most especially, I learned that Nerf guns are appropriate for every occasion. Thank you.
Jenna Young, everybody. That's the nicest story about white people with guns I ever heard.
All right, that's a truth.
Tim, what'd you think?
I thought she did very well. You helped her out with that statement right there, too. She mentioned right at the outset, there's a comedy show. That's right. Yes, absolutely. So that was a truth. She also said when you're adult, you can buy all the Nerf guns you want. That is correct. She should have also said, and your children will take them all. But nonetheless, I accept it as a truth. And why shoot someone when you can use the Force is a great point. There were a couple of lies. She mentioned the bit about inventing a Russian roulette drinking game. Is that really inventing? I feel it was more rediscovered. than inventing. And also, she did say that everyone can win. That is not true. There is only one winner, and it's not you. So that's a lie. But we are tied now. Truths and lies are tied.
All right. Give it up for Jenna Young, everybody. All right. We have a couple of presenters left. Hopefully our next one will take us from being tied to the lead. We'll see what happens. Please give a huge round of applause to the awesome and wonderful Mike David Postle.
Give me far too much credit, Duck. Hey, is everybody having a good time so far? It's so great that I can't see a single soul in the audience. And you're right, it's hot as balls up here. Okay, so it's really funny that I accepted to do this particular encyclopedia game about unusual games, right? Because I realized after I accepted it that I'm one of those rare birds that doesn't like games in particular. Game nights, whenever they're like, hey, come on over and play game nights, I get this swell of anxiety, right? Because it's always a couple that like brings out like a shit ton of boxes of games and they set them down and they're always like, this is a fun game for couples, and you're like, oh, okay. But then I start sweating because it's like, Jesus, you guys know how to play, so there's already a handicap in place and I'm gonna be terrible at this, you know? And it stems back to like, my family was always late adopter for games, which is a way of saying things like, we weren't going to buy you the Atari 2600, you know, when it first came out, even though we begged for it, you know. So by the time like ColecoVision and Intellivision came out, and George Plimpton was like he was like, you should play the Intellivision. It's got the remote controller. We were like, can we please have it? And my parents brought home like the Sears model, and all the games are already on clearance. So I mean, the best part I can say about the Sears model of Atari 2600 in the games is that when I played Raiders of the Lost Ark, I learned what tsetse flies were. Not many people knew what a tsetse fly was. Somebody played the Atari. Cool, right? So, you know, like, and that went on. Like, I actually, when we bought the PlayStation finally, oh, Jesus. So, this is funny. Xbox and, like, PlayStation 3 had already been out, and so here's me with my PlayStation playing, like, Tekken 3, and like, my girlfriend's begging me to turn it into, like, a salsa bowl, because she's like, nobody plays that anymore, and I'm like, fuck you, Jedi Power Battles, you know, roar, Gungans. But I'm terrible at them, you know, and I was terrible at role-playing games as a little kid. I had ADHD, so it was like, there was rules and there were books, and I liked the idea of campaigns, but all these pewter figures were just too cool, and I wanted to play with them, but they had no articulation, so it was like, I failed miserably. And now, you know, as an adult, I have assembled a collection of games, you know, like a fairly impressive collection of games I think humans would like to play if they came over, right? And they're all in the closet, so when, you know, my wife's like, hey, we should play games. I'm like, yes, let us go get these human games. And I come bring them out like utter nonsense and fucking Cards Against Humanity. And like, let us play these games. Oh yes, funny responses to other dirty cards. And it's great. But honestly, we don't have a gaming system at home. I work with people who love games, and I was like struggling, like really struggling. Like, how do I come up with this? And you know, like, do I talk about the red ball games when we were in elementary school with that marvelous sound it made when we played ships across, like, you know, like dodgeball, you know, it made that thwack, and it makes you sweat even now, because you're like, if I got hit by that stupid thing, I'm out. You know, it's already like, you know, survival of the fittest when you're 9. Great. But I failed miserably at that. I'm like, I have no basis to make an entertaining member of your crew tonight, except for saying a Raiders of the Lost Ark Atari game, which I figured you'd maybe dig a little bit to get some extra points. So, Duck, come over here. Can you hold out your hand, please? Okay. Duck, can you tell the audience what you have in your hand right now?
I have shit in my hand, Mike.
Does it look pretty impressive, though? Is that an impressive turd?
Not in comparison to mine, no.
Thank you, Doug. That's all I really needed. Tim, was this a piece of shit right now in my hand?
Yes.
That's great. So, now that I have the judges and the host captivated, I just realized something that is an entertaining couple game that my wife and I played that I wanted to share with you quick like a bunny. And it actually takes us back to the summer of 2016. My mom passed, because this can't be a really dope-ass Encyclopedia show without sharing a personal sad story. So my mother passed away in 2016. And the summer of 2016, she was a hoarder. Cool. Which meant she did not like open spaces. And it wasn't like she had like pancakes under the mattress or anything weird. She just could not stand to get rid of anything. Everything had an emotional attachment to it. So I found this out about myself when I Marie Kondoed the shit out of my place in anticipation of my daughter being born, because I'm like finding the report cards from 8th grade. And I don't need to know that I got a C+ in fucking algebra. But Mom had this, and we were in her bedroom. We finally like literally chipped our way into the bedroom, and there was this cherry oak, magnificent, about this high, jewelry box, right? So the sides would open up, the top would open up with a mirror. You know, I remembered it very vividly, giving it to her, and it was chipped to hell. And at this point, it was filled with like empty prescription bottles and shit. Like literally, like there was 2 pieces of jewelry, but then garbage in the rest of it. And as I was going through the drawers and pulling them open, this is amazing. I pull one open and I pull out this little velvet bag that contained all of my older brother's dye from when he played D&D and Paranoia and Marvel Superheroes when we both did, with these 2 dorks, Joshua and Joseph Scrimshaw. You guys ever heard of those dorks? Yeah. They were like the new kids that we played games with. Woo! Dorks. And then this little dusty bastard popped out. Now, to rewind a little bit further, when I was, a little kid, I had the little kid's fascination about 10, 11, 12, 13 of novelty things you'd see in a comic book on that page next to the Charles Atlas Get Bigger with the Springs, right? And there was no place to get these. My parents wouldn't let me send money away. But in Hopkins, Minnesota, at the Knollwood Mall, there was a store, for anybody old enough who lived around here, called the Fun Shop. Now, think of Spencer's before Spencer started like pimping like, oh, I'm going to have these pot leaves and like bachelorette dicks on a stick, straws, right, whatever. But this place had like nothing but novelty items. So going there was like Bart Simpson on The Simpsons going to the Mad Magazine like publisher's place, I would walk in there and there was whoopee cushions and fake vomit and like cans of brittle with like the things that would spring out. And my mom would be like, there you go, kiddo. And that was when I saw, and I remember I bought this turd. And in like a Ziploc baggie with a little black thing on it that said fart buster. And it was just a cork. Right. So I came away with these 2 things. It was the most amazing experience of my life. And they built things to last back then, right? Not like these terrible turds now, which are just like plastic and resin and nonsense. No! I mean, honestly, and if we're dating myself, this is a little bit over 30-year-old piece of fake shit in my hand that was covered in dust, and I'm looking at it, cleaning my mom's house with this strange reverie, and I'm just like, Jesus, she saved this. Along with a little box with like my fucking baby teeth and another box that had Mikey's first haircut in it. And my wife is like, oh, that's so sweet, as I told her the same story about the Fun Shop, as she like swapped open the bag of, the industrial bag for garbage. And I was like, fuck no, baby, this is a legacy turd. So I brought it home. And, that night I went and I rinsed off all the dust from it, and I set it down. And the next morning, I remember hearing my wife's protest. It was like, no, honey, throw this away. I don't want a turd in the drying rack. And to her credit, this was a soggy turd and glistening in the drying rack in the sink, which I'm sure she probably didn't need to see. Which brings me up to this unusual game of mine. Because, it's like outside of counseling, right? But, I was like, I can't get rid of this thing. I can't bring myself to throw away this thing that reminds me of my mom and her support and encouragement of being weird and being funny. I mean, fuck, we bought like 4 whoopee cushions, 4, right? Like after you got through the novelty of putting them under a pillow, it was like, now let's see if we can do like a strongman competition with a hot water bottle and be like, and then stomp on them so they made that boom sound, right? But no, she was okay with coming home and like putting this in random spots. Hence we now have what is an unusual game and what keeps it marriage spicy, Derek. And it's called Hide the Turd. And one day, I thought it would be really, I don't know, fuck. How far can you get on charm, friends? Pretty far, even if your charm sucks. One day I decided to hide this in her winter boot. And so I get a text, and all it is in all caps, boot turd! And it has now devolved. And I have a laundry list that's just really funny. And there's shoe poop, there has been coat poop, glove poop, there has been pillow poop. And my most recent favorite, and the trick is of this game, in case you guys want to play this at home, right? I'm sure Spencer says fake shit, or maybe use real shit if you're into, like, you know, corporophobia or corporophilia, whatever. But the trick is finding a place to place said turd so that you can find it, but it doesn't fall so far out of memory that, like, you forget it for months on end. For example, I had a new pair of shoes that I wore to when I just gave up my last job and I quit. I'm like, I'm going to wear these dope-ass kicks to work. And as I took them out and I was removing the paper, because they were still in the box, from one of the shoes, I removed a piece of shit. And so I'm like, no shoe poop! And we always said it in all caps. And as my very pregnant wife went to the gym to do her due diligence, she opened up the wireless earbuds that I gave her, and I was managed to cram it in there. And I just got earbud poop! So I know, it's like, it literally makes me cackle every time I get a text that's in all caps that ends in poop, exclamation point, or in, like, interrobang, whatever. So yes, my unusual game is hide the poop, and do not discount how a 10-year-old's joy can still bring you joy as a 44-year-old adult man, especially when I'm anticipating a new girl, and I'll have plenty of the real thing to go around probably for years. So thank you very much.
Give it up for Mike Apostle, everybody. God, that was a shitty set. Tim, what did you think?
That was a shitty story. Wow. Okay. Well, very quick. I know we're a little bit pressed for time here, but I do have a few truths and a few lies we need to get through. I did give you a truth for the Raiders of the Lost Ark reference. I did catch that. However, you also got a lie because you said nobody knows what a tsetse fly is. Everybody knows what a tsetse fly is. Come on. Also, you got a truth for saying fucking Cards Against Humanity, because yeah, fucking Cards Against Humanity. But then you said it's great. Lie. Okay, and also you said you're a 44-year-old adult. No, sir, not true. So the lies are ahead by a point.
Oh, no.
So we're in trouble, and we only have one more presenter.
Yes, and let's get him right to the stage. Everybody, this is one of my favorite Encyclopedia show presenters. Please welcome Javier Morello Alcia.
So when I turned 12, it was time for my home's rite of passage, learning the birds and the bees. And how that happened in our house was that when my mother always told us that growing up, no one told her anything about sex, and she wanted it to be different for us. And so she gave my brother a 4-volume life cycle library. And when I was 12, it was passed down to me. And around that same time, the Army base we lived on in Puerto Rico, we got a Boy Scout troop. And everyone was really excited, including me, for me to join the Boy Scouts, because my dad was in the Army, and some years before, when we were in Germany, my brothers had been in the Boy Scouts, and they were really into the Boy Scouts. And so everyone was certain that I would be into the Boy Scouts until I joined the Boy Scouts, and I was not really into the Boy Scouts. And we were, in December that year, about to go on our first camping trip, and I was not looking forward to it. As you see, our troop was sort of run by this kid named Mickey, and Mickey was older than all the other kids. He had been held back in school, and so he was older and bigger than us, and I was terrified of him. And so I did not want to go on this camping trip, but and it was just overnight, and it was to the Navy base a couple hours away. It's not a big deal. But the Friday afternoon before we're supposed to leave, I was in our living room watching TV, and there's a knock on the door, and I answer, and there's these 2 kids there, and they say, "Hey, don't you guys have a little white and brown and white dog?" And they say, "Yeah, that's our dog Chitty." And they say, "Well, he's up on the hill and his stomach is hanging out." And I went in to tell my parents. We thought Chitty was inside, but they went out to look for him. And indeed, what had happened was that on the base we lived on, there was this pack of wild dogs that we all knew about. And Chitty was a Chihuahua, but like a lot of Chihuahuas, he was a badass, he thought. And he got into a fight with these wild dogs, and they killed him. He sort of died this horrible death. I was just devastated. We all were. Chitty had been a gift my parents got for my oldest brother, Jose, because as a young kid, he had asthma. And when we were stationed in Texas, Mexican curandera, a healer woman, had told my mother that the way to cure a boy's asthma was to get him a Chihuahua. So get him a Chihuahua. But Chitty was a very weird Chihuahua because he was super tall for a Chihuahua. Like he had a little Chihuahua body, but like on really long legs, like stilts. And he was named after the old Disney movie Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which was a sometimes unfortunate name in a family where our parents spoke English as a second language and very heavy accents, because Spanish speakers, when they learn English, often transpose SH and CH sounds. So soon after the family got Chitty, Dad had his staff sergeant over for dinner, and he heard my mother call the dog and yelled at my dad, "Murillo, you called your dog Shitty? What's wrong with you?" He was not a shitty dog at all. He was lovely, and I was devastated. But the family insisted that I go on this trip so that I would forget our dog dying, which of course didn't work. And so as we were putting our tents up, I kept having to like walk away so the other boys wouldn't see me cry. And as we were putting the tents up, it started like drizzling rain. And then in December is the really rainy season on the island, and it started really raining hard. And so everyone took refuge under this picnic cement picnic area thing. And our genius scoutmasters, they had not weathered the tents, so they went off to figure out what they were going to do. And under this picnic area, Mickey was holding court. And so I approached, and everyone's crowded around Mickey, and it was at first the normal, like ghost tales and things like that. But eventually Mickey started talking about sex, and I was terrified. And then he started playing this game. He thought it was super funny to pull his erect penis out of his pant leg of his shorts. And I'll remind you, he'd been held back in grades, and so he was older and larger than the rest of us. And so all of us were, trying to pretend that we weren't witnessing this enormous penis that was over here. And then Mickey starts to play this game where he waves his penis around, and he says, wherever it stops, and whoever it's pointing at, that means you're gay. At some sort of perverted Ouija board or something. And I was sitting there terrified that the Ouija penis would point at me, because of course, as an adult, you're probably thinking the same thing. Hold on, you're pointing your erect penis at me, but I'm the gay one. I mean, clearly I was the gay one, but still, on principle. But he's waving the Ouija penis, and it does not point at me. It points at someone else. And the scoutmasters come back and finally break up all the fun and games. And because they'd not weathered the tents, we couldn't stay there. So we all were taken over to the barracks to spend the night there. And so we were treated the next morning to catcalls from all the sailors who were making fun of the queer scout troop that could not stand a little rain. So that was super fun. But when we got home, I locked myself in my room to mourn my dog, and I pulled out the life cycle library, and on the first volume, opened the book, and wrote the date, December 1st, 1981. So I would never forget the day that Chitty died. And then I quit the Boy Scouts. Thank you.
All right, let's give it up for Ouija Penis.
Yeah.
No, Javier, everybody, Javier. Tim, we're kind of out of time, but did we win?
Really quick, we did. Yeah, Chihuahuas do cure asthma. That's true. Ouija Penis, I gave a truth for that. And also, absolutely, Scoutmasters didn't prep the tents. Yeah, it's true. Scoutmasters are fucking idiots. So, yeah, we have truths defeating lies. We also have 3 family deaths in this 1 hour. So, well done, everyone.
Yeah, it's comedy. Thank you all for being here. We perform currently at Karen's Irish Pub. We're there for 2 more shows, and then we're on the search for a new home. So come and check us out. Our next show is Mascots on April 14th, and I'll give it back to our wonderful host.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Duck. Give it up for the Encyclopedia Show and all of the wonderful performers that performed in the Encyclopedia Show.